Okay, this is the close reading of Thomas Carlyle's Past and Present, Book 1, Chapter 2, The Sphinx. How true, for example, is that other old fable of the Sphinx, who sat by the wayside propounding her riddle to the passengers, which if they could not answer, she destroyed them. Such a Sphinx is this life of ours to all men and societies of men. Nature, like the Sphinx, is of womanly celestial loveliness and tenderness, the face and bosom of a goddess, but ending in claws and the body of a lioness. There is in her a celestial beauty, which means celestial order, pliancy to wisdom, but there's also a darkness, a ferocity, fatality, which are infernal. So in this chapter, we're going to, or Carlyle is going to address the Sphinx, which has the head and bosom of a woman, a goddess, but then has a lioness in the rest of her body. So, and obviously the Sphinx gives a riddle to the people that pass by, and if they can't solve that riddle, she destroys them. So Carlyle is going to meditate on this ancient metaphor. She is a goddess, but one not yet disimprisoned, one still half imprisoned, the articulate, lovely, still encased in the inarticulate, chaotic. And by this, it obviously is talking about the half goddess and half lioness part. How true! And does she not propound her riddles to us? Of each man she asks daily, in mild voice, yet with a terrible significance, knowest thou the meaning of this day? What thou canst do today, wisely attempt to do. What thou canst do today, wisely attempt to do. Oh, what can you do today in a wise manner? So every day we are, all of mankind, as well as societies of mankind, so nations, are confronted with the question, do you know the meaning of today, and what must you do today? Nature, universe, destiny, existence, howsoever we name this grand unnameable fact in the midst of which we live and struggle, is as a heavenly bride and conquest to the wise and brave, to them who can discern her behests and do them, a destroying feed to them who cannot. So this fact that we live in, nature, universe, however you call it, it is a bride to the wise and brave. So if you can understand her, I believe this means orders. Yeah, if you can understand her orders, they become a heavenly bride to be conquered. But if you can't do those, then you become an evil spirit or demon if you cannot understand and do the orders. Answer her riddle, it is well within thee. Answer her riddle, it is well within thee. So at least the capacity to answer, to meet the challenges of the day, Carlyle thinks is within us. Answer it not, pass on regarding it not, it will answer itself. The solution for thee is a thing of teeth and claws. Nature is a dumb lioness, deaf to thy pleadings, fiercely devouring. So if you answer the riddle, you will do well. But if you don't, if you pass on without regard to what the answer to nature's current riddle is, then you will meet the lioness. And it will not listen to your pleadings, and it will not be merciful. Thou art not now her victorious bridegroom. So not now meaning if you don't listen, if you are not able to solve the riddle, then thou art not now her victorious bridegroom, because it was a heavenly bride to be conquered. Thou art her mangled victim, scattered on the precipices as a slave found treacherous, recreant, ought to be and must. Recreant means cowardly, unfaithful. So if you are not able to meet the challenges of the day, you no longer will be the conqueror of the bride, the bridegroom. You will be the mangled victim of a lioness. You will be scattered on the cliff, just like a slave, a treacherous and cowardly slave ought to be and must. So in other words, that is the fate that you deserve. With nations, it is as with individuals. Can they read the riddle of destiny? I love this word read. If we look at the archaic interpretation, it means interpret a riddle or a dream. So read the riddle means interpret the riddle of destiny. This English nation, will it get to know the meaning of its strange new today? Is there sense enough extant, meaning existing, discoverable anywhere or anyhow in our united 27 million heads to discern the same meaning, the meaning of its strange new today, to discern the same, valor enough in our 27 million hearts to dare and do the bidding thereof, it will be seen. So among our 27 million people in England, is there anyone, is there enough wisdom and to understand the riddle? Is there enough valor to walk and do what it commands us to do? The secret of gold Midas, which he with his long ears never could discover, was that he had offended the supreme powers, that he had parted company with the eternal inner facts of this universe and followed the transient outer appearances thereof, and so was arrived here. Properly, it is the secret of all unhappy men and unhappy nations. Had they known nature's right truth would have made them free. They have become enchanted, stagger spellbound, reeling on the brink of huge peril, because they are not wise enough. They have forgotten the right inner true and taken up with the outer sham true. They answered the Sphinx question wrong. Foolish men cannot answer it aright. Foolish men mistake transitory semblance for eternal fact and go astray more and more. So the passage is pretty clear, but he's saying the Midas didn't mistook the truth with the appearance of truth. In other words, a falsity, a sham, a fake. And he followed the fake, and as do many others, and they become enchanted, so they become like spellbound, and they walk into major danger because they are not in alignment or have forgotten the right true. They are not able to answer the question of the day correctly. Foolish men imagine that because judgment for an evil thing is delayed, there is no justice but an accidental one here below. Judgment for an evil thing is many times delayed, some day or two, some century or two, but it is sure as life, it is sure as death. In the center of the world whirlwind, verily now as in the oldest days, dwells and speaks a God. The great soul of the world is just. Oh, brother, can it be needful now, at this late epoch of experience, after 18 centuries of Christian preaching for one thing, to remind thee of such a fact, which all manner of Mohammedans, all pagan Romans, Jews, Scythians, and heathen Greeks, and indeed more or less all men that God made, have managed at one time to see into, nay, which thou thyself till red tape strangled the inner life of thee hadst once some inkling of, that there is justice here below, and even at bottom that there is nothing else but justice. So Carlyle is asking, well, first of all, he's asserting that judgment for evil will come, whether it might be delayed by a day or two, century or two, but it absolutely, no doubt in his mind, will come. And so he's asking the question, oh brother, and by brother I assume he means his fellow 27 million Englishmen. Is it really necessary here in the mid-1800s, so after 18 centuries of Christian preaching, to remind you of this basic, what in his mind is a totally basic, absolute certainty fact, that there is justice in the world, and even at bottom, that there is nothing else but justice. So the core of the universe, as Carlyle sees it and describes it, is just. And he's saying, even all these, basically from the point of view of Christianity, the pagans and he gives a bunch of them, he says even they have all noticed, more or less all men of God have noticed that fundamental truth, that there is justice in the world. And do I really need to remind you of that? Is Carlyle asking. Forget that, thou hast forgotten all. Success will never more attend thee. How can it now? Thou hast the whole universe against thee. No more success, mere sham success for a day and days, rising even higher towards its Tarpeian rock. So Carlyle is saying that when you forget this basic premise that there is justice in the world, you go astray. There's no more success, he says, but there's sham success, and it keeps rising, meaning there's a semblance of success. It might be until the day of judgment, until the punishment for this evil comes, and it might be a day or two, it might be a century or two, during which time your sham success appears to be rising until towards its Tarpeian rock. This Tarpeian rock, it is an actual place. This rock of Tarpeia, let me see. The rock of Tarpeia is a steep cliff on the south side of the Capitoline Hill that was used in ancient Rome as a site of execution. Adjudicated murderers, traitors, perjurers, and larcenous slaves, if convicted by the people, let's say, or the appropriate agencies, were flung from the cliff to their deaths. The cliff was about 25 meters high. So he's saying your sham success might rise in the meantime until the moment that it's basically flung from a cliff until it meets its end. Alas, how in thy soft-hung, long-acre vehicle of polished leather to the bodily eye, of red-tape philosophy, of expediences, club-room moralities, parliamentary majorities to the mind's eye, thou beautifully rollest, but knowest thou whitherward? So the Longacre, by the way, is a busy shopping thoroughfare in the Covent Garden area of London. So he's talking, you might be in your plush vehicle, plush of the horse-drawn carriages at that time, with polished leather, talking about procedural philosophy and all sorts of bourgeois moralities and societies. But do you know where you're rolling towards? He's asking. He's saying it's towards the road's end. Old use and wont, which is talking about the way things were, something that was done in a particular way in the past. So old use and wont, established methods, habitudes, once true and wise, man's noblest tendency, his perseverance, and man's ignoblest, his inertia. Whatsoever of noble and ignoble conservatism there is in men and nations, strongest always in the strongest men and nations, all this is as a road to thee, paved smooth through the abyss till all this end. So he's saying the car you're in, that you're sort of unwittingly in and gliding towards, it has a certain momentum of its own, momentum of habits, momentum of ways of thinking, a little bit disconnected from the core justice and core question that the Sphinx is asking of the day. It can be both noble and ignoble. So in terms of carrying on the traditions of the past, that can be a perseverance, but it can also be inertia. And this conservatism, either way, of doing what you've done in the past, it is carrying you, it's going smooth right now, but it's a smooth paved through the abyss till all the end. So until basically your Tarpeian rock, until you are forced to face the question of the Sphinx, and if you answer it wrongly, which it is implying that you're doing with being disconnected from the challenges of the day, from the riddle from the justness that is demanded and the courage that is demanded, When you are at the end, you will meet the Tarpeian rock, you will meet the end. Till men's bitter necessities can endure thee no more, till nature's patience with thee is done, and there is no road or footing any further, and the abyss yawns sheer. I loved this last phrase, the abyss yawns sheer. So this is, we're talking about the end of the road. Your old habits, your conservatism, your inertia has brought you to the point where you are disconnected, with your red tapes and clubroom moralities and whatever. You're disconnected from the question that the Sphinx is asking. You're disconnected from the justice that the universe and nature is demanding. And therefore, at some point, the nature's patience with you will be done. You will not be able to continue any further. And the abyss will yawn, as in open wide, sheer, like a cliff. It'll be abrupt. The phrase very slowly and then all of a sudden at once. That is the image I'm getting here. Parliament and the courts of Westminster are venerable to me. How venerable, grey with 1,000 years of honourable age. For 1,000 years and more, wisdom and faithful valour, struggling amid much folly and greedy baseness, not without most sad distortions in the struggle, have built them up, and they are as we see, they being the Parliament and the courts of Westminster. So he says, I have a certain amount of respect for them. I have a certain amount of respect for the institutions, the judging institutions of England, as well as the discussion institutions of England, the Parliament. He says they've served us well for 1,000 years. A lot of wisdom and valor were there, but also mixed in with quite a bit of folly and baseness. They've been built up, and they are what they are today. He's not. He has respect for them, but doesn't seem super impressed by them. For 1,000 years, this English nation has found them useful or supportable. They have served this English nation's want, been a road to it through the abyss of time. I love the emphasis to been, as in, they served us well, but that serving is in the past, seems to be implied by Carlyle. They are venerable, they are great and strong, and yet it is good to remember always that they are not the venerablest, nor the greatest, nor the strongest. Acts of Parliament are venerable, but if they correspond not with the writing on the adamant tablet, what are they? Properly, their one element of venerableness, of strength or greatness, is that they at all times correspond therewith as near as by human possibility they can. They are cherishing destruction in their bosom every hour that they continue otherwise. So he's saying these Parliament and the courts of Westminster, they are venerable and strong, but they are not what is the most respectable and the strongest out there. That is the writing on the adamant tablet. Adamant is, let's just look it up. A legendary rock or mineral to which many often contradictory properties were attributed to, formerly associated with diamond or lodestone. So basically when somebody says adamant or adamantine, they're talking about a very hard rock. And obviously a tablet is the image you get from a tablet in Carlyle's time in the 1800s is something of a rock that you inscribe things to. So he's talking about a very strong, immovable, unchanging tablet, which is that the core nature of the universe is just and it demands a certain justice. So he's saying the acts of Parliament, they're venerable, but if they don't correspond with what is demanded by nature, by the universe, by God, as we'll later see, what even are they? So the only legitimacy that acts of Parliament derive is that they correspond as near as humanly possible to what is demanded by nature, basically to meeting the justice, the eternal justice. And if they don't do that, they are cherishing destruction. Every hour they continue otherwise. Alas, how many causes that can plead well for themselves in the courts of Westminster. Uh, yeah. Alas, how many causes that can plead well for themselves in the courts of Westminster, and yet in the general court of the universe and free soul of man have no word to utter. So there's a lot of cases and causes that, humans are debating and making a case for, that they're really like in front of the universe, in front of God, in front of the free soul of man. You really can't defend. They're indefensible. Honorable gentlemen may find this worth considering in times like ours. And truly, the din of triumphant law logic and all shaking of horsehair wigs and learned sergeant gowns having comfortably ended, we shall do well to ask ourselves withal, what says that high and highest court to the verdict? For it is the court of courts, that same where the universal soul of fact and very truth sits president, and thitherward, more and more swiftly, with a really terrible increase of swiftness, all causes do in these days crowd for revisal, for confirmation, for modification, for reversal with costs. Dost thou know that court? Hast thou had any law practiced there? What didst thou never enter, never file any petition of redress, reclaimer, disclaimer, or demurrer, written as in thy heart's blood for thy own behoof or another's, and silently await the issue? Thou knowest not such a court, hast merely heard of it by faint tradition as a thing that was or had been. Of thee, I think, we shall get little benefit. So he is saying that, going back to the previous space, honorable gentlemen may consider, all the stuff that all these cases being argued that have no really legitimacy in the eyes of the universe. And he's saying that din means a loud, unpleasant, and prolonged noise. So he's saying there's a lot of noise essentially about law logic, so legal arguments. Horsehair wigs is obviously referring to the wigs in the courts of England. A lot of learned sergeant refers to lawyers, I believe, so a lot of lawyers and their gowns. And after all of this, he's saying, what would the high and highest court, so what would nature, what would universe say to all of this noise? Because he says all of the causes are hurling towards that court of courts so that they will be heard again, and they're hurling towards that very quickly. They will be heard again, they will be revised or confirmed. Some of the causes that are being discussed are just. They are ending up with just resolutions, so they will be confirmed. But many will be revised, many will be modified, and many will be reversed, and costs will be imposed. So he's saying, do you know this court? Have you had any dealings there? So how do your causes stack when judged from the perspective of the Sphinx or of nature? And he's now mocking the reader. What do you mean? You don't even know this court other than by faint tradition. You kind of vaguely know of it in the past. Maybe it's a thing of the past, but you've never really considered any of your cases, any of your desires, any of your perspectives from the perspective of the Sphinx, the nature. And well, he says, of you, we shall get little benefit. If you haven't even considered that, you will be of no use. For the gowns of learned surgeons are good, parchment records, fixed forms, and poor terrestrial justice, with or without horsehair. What sane man will not reverence these? And yet, behold, the man is not sane, but insane, who considers these alone as venerable. Oceans of horsehair, continents of parchment, and the learned sergeant eloquence, where it continued till the learned tongue wore itself small in the indefatigable learned mouth, cannot make unjust just. So he's saying, of course, there are all these, our justice system has all these forms. There are all these records being kept. There are all these men with wigs and parchments and lawyers, learned men that speak eloquently. Of course, you will have them, you will hold them in reverence. You will respect them. But he's saying those things alone do not make them venerable. In fact, you can have all of the accoutrements of justice, the horsehair, the wigs, the parchments, etc. And you can have the eloquence of the entire world until the tongue is worn itself small in the tireless mouth. None of this can make something that is fundamentally unjust just. So Carlyle is saying the core question remains. The accoutrements, the form of the thing is not as good as the essence of the thing. We need to, the essence demands an answer. The grand question still remains, was the judgment just? If unjust, it will not and cannot get harbor for itself or continue to have footing in this universe, which was made by other than one unjust. So it's saying, this universe, our universe, it was made by other than an unjust God. It was made, in other words, it was made by a just God. So therefore, an unjust verdict cannot remain. Enforced by never such statuting, 3 readings, royal assents, blow it to the 4 winds with all manner of quilted trumpeters and pursuants, in the rear of them never so many gibbets and hangmen, it will not stand, it cannot stand. From all souls of men, from all ends of nature, from the throne of God above, there are voices bidding it away, away. So he's saying an unjust verdict, basically no matter how much you try to enforce it, it will not stand. And it's interesting the language he uses here. So enforce it by never such statuting. It means, in the archaic way, it means by however many statutes you want. So you can pass as many laws as you want. The 3 readings refer to a procedure in the British Parliament where I think you need to recite the law 3 times or something, or discuss it 3 times, something procedural to make it a real law. Royal assent, so you can get the royals behind you. You can spread it far and wide with trumpeters. Pursuance means an officer of the College of Arms in British English. So you can have people cheering it. You can have soldiers enforcing it. You can have gibbets and hangmen. Gibbets means gallows. So basically you can threaten actions, threaten enforcement. Still, an unjust verdict will not stand. It cannot stand. Because all souls of men and all ends of nature and God above, they are all bidding it away, away. So there's enormous resistance from nature demanding justice, basically. Does it take no warning? Does it stand strong in its 3 readings, in its gibbets and artillery parks? The more woe is to it, the frightfuler woe. It will continue standing for its day, for its year, for its century, doing evil all the while, but it has one enemy who is almighty. Dissolution, explosion, and the everlasting laws of nature incessantly advance towards it. And the deeper its rooting, more obstinate its continuing, the deeper also and huger will be its ruin and overturn be. So Carlyle is saying, the unjust verdict demands to be ratified. It demands to be just, to be made just. But if the enforcement, with the statues and the readings and the hangman as well as the cheerers, etc., if all of that is too much, and it's it stays for a while, so it can continue standing for that day, for that year, for a century. It will continue doing evil. But he's saying it has no chance because it's on the other side is the Almighty and the laws of nature, and they are incessantly advancing towards making that unjust verdict just. And the only thing that will change is that the more obstinate men and nations are in doing something unjust, the greater their destruction will be when justice finally prevails. In this God's world, with its wild whirling eddies and mad foam oceans where men and nations perish as if without law, and judgment for an unjust thing is sternly delayed, dost thou think that there is therefore no justice? It is what the fool had said in his heart. It is what the wise in all times were wise because they denied and knew forever not to be. So he's saying, just because the judgment for injustice is delayed, do you think therefore there is no justice? He's saying that's what the fools believe and think. And he's saying in all times, the wise people know that the eternal justice is coming. They know forever, basically, not to believe that just because it's delayed, it does not exist. I tell thee again, there's nothing else but justice. One strong thing I find here below, the just thing, the true thing. My friend, if thou hadst all the artillery of Woolwich trundling at thy back in support of an unjust thing, and infinite bonfires visibly waiting ahead of thee to blaze centuries long for thy victory on behalf of it, I would advise thee to call halt, to fling down thy baton, and say in God's name, no. Thy success, poor devil, what will thy success amount to? If the thing is unjust, thou hast not succeeded. No, not though bonfires blazed from north to south and bells rang and editors wrote leading articles and the just thing lay trampled out of sight. The just thing lay trampled out of sight to all mortal eyes an abolished and annihilated thing. Success? In few years thou wilt be dead and dark, all cold, eyeless, deaf, no blaze of bonfires, ding-dong of bells or leading articles visible or audible to thee again at all forever. What kind of success is that? So Carlyle is saying a number of things here. So first he says, even if you had everything going for you, so this is a little bit similar to all the trumpeteers and all of the three readings, etc. Even if you tried to put everything, including the artillery of Woolwich, which is a reference to the Royal Artillery Barracks in Woolwich. So basically, if you had all the artillery firepower of Britain trundling at thy back in support, can I just open a parenthesis and say Carlyle's English and the English language is just so nice. Trundling is a word that means, if I get it like this, with reference to a wheeled vehicle or its occupants, move or cause to move slowly and heavily, typically in a noisy or uneven way. I just love that there's like a word for this. This is so perfect. So he's saying, even if you had all the artillery of Britain at your back in support of an unjust thing, even if you, all the fires will blaze for your victory of this on behalf of this unjust thing, he says, I would advise you to stop and fling down thy baton, basically to stop going down this road, because he says, even if you spread this unjust thing north to south, even if all the bells rang, even if every newspaper in the country put articles in favor of it, and even if to all mortal eyes, so to everyone, it seemed like the just thing lay trampled out of sight. In a few years, everything will be reversed. There will be no blaze anymore. You will be dead and dark. and all the articles and all the bells will disappear. So you basically, Carlyle is saying your success will be transient. And obviously, with this previous paragraph, the more you insist on going in the wrong direction, the more ferocious the snapback will be. It is true, all goes by approximation in this world, and with any not insupportable approximation, we must be patient. There is a noble conservatism as well as an ignoble. Would to heaven, for the sake of conservatism itself, the noble alone were left, and the ignoble, by some kind of severe hand, were ruthlessly lopped away, forbidden evermore to show itself. For it is the right and noble alone that will have victory in this struggle. The rest is wholly an obstruction, a postponement and fearful imperilment of the victory. Towards an eternal center of right and nobleness, and of that only, is all this confusion trending. So he's again talking a little bit, it's a little bit obscure about this conservatism, but as previously mentioned, the noble conservatism is the perseverance, so continuing the traditions of the past, but the ignoble one is inertia. So basically a lack of courage, an inaction, or doing the stuff they've always done because of an inability to analyze and to hear the riddle of the Sphinx anew. So he's saying, for the sake of conservatism, for the sake of this temperament, can you please just keep the noble one, the one that wants you to honor your ancestors, the one that wants you to keep the traditions of the past? But the part of conservatism, the ignoble one, coming from inertia, from basically laziness, from a refusal to hear the Sphinx, would you please cut that part off? Towards an eternal center of right and nobleness, so towards this just universe, is all of this confusion trending. The arc of, what was the Martin Luther King phrase? The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That is almost exactly the same sentiment here. We already know whither it is all trending. We know where it's all going. We know the end. What will have victory? What will have none? The heaviest will reach center. The heaviest, sinking through complex fluctuating media and vortices, has its deflections, which means deflections, has its deflections, its obstructions, nay, at times its resiliences, its reboundings, whereupon some blockhead shall be heard jubilating, see, your heaviest ascends. But at all moments it is moving centerward, fast as is convenient for it, sinking, and by laws older than the world, old as the Maker's first plan of the world, it has to arrive there. So in here, Carlyle paints an image where at the center there's right and nobleness, and the heaviest in this context are the just actions, the correct actions, those that are in alignment with the fundamental justice demanded by the universe and by nature. He's saying they're sinking towards this eternal right and nobleness. So these actions go towards there. However complex and fluctuating the intermediate steps might be, the correct actions are reaching the correct center at the end. This part where he says, nay, at times it's resilience. So even the correct actions sometimes are reaching the path, the center, not or are being recognized by the center, not in a sort of straight way, but they can be seen to be going, the right action can be seen to be away from the center of right and nobleness, where the blockhead, so idiots, will be heard, see, your heaviest ascends. So they will, the Correct actions might be misinterpreted to have immediate rewards in the present, even though the true reward is the alignment with the center of right and nobleness. And Carlyle says these are laws older than the world. It has to arrive there. It has to, correct actions are going to be aligned with the center of right and nobleness. Await the issue. In all battles, if you await the issue, each fighter has prospered according to his right. His right and his might, at the close of the account, were one and the same. He has fought with all his might, and in exact proportion to all his right, he has prevailed. His very death is no victory over him. He dies indeed, but his work lives, very truly lives. A heroic Wallace quartered on the scaffold cannot hinder that his Scotland become one day a part of England, but he does hinder that it become on tyrannous, unfair terms a part of it. Command still, as with a god's voice from his old Valhalla and temple of the brave, that there be a just, real union, as of brother and brother, not a false and merely semblant one as of slave and master. Just a moment. So this Wallace, let me just find it. As you can see, I've done a bunch of ChatGPTing around this. So, okay. Wallace refers to Sir William Wallace, the Scottish knight and national hero who led the first major rebellion against English rule during the Wars of Scottish Independence. So, Carlyle is saying here that, he's saying a couple of things. So, first of all, he says, if you just wait, ultimately, so why is this waiting stuff coming up? It's because the correct actions find their way to the center of right and nobleness, but there might be confusion in the middle. There might be complex fluctuating media and vortices in the middle. So it's not always, the just actions may not necessarily be recognized as such immediately. Therefore, Carlyle says, await the issue, just wait for a bit, and you will see finally that each fighter has prospered according to his right. So in the alignment, to the extent that they were in alignment with nature's justice, they will have prospered. So he says, for example, this William Wallace of Scotland, who was executed, he was not able to hinder that Scotland became part of England. But his heroic acts on the battlefield ensured, in other words, he's not just the fact that he lost the fight does not mean that he lost the eternal fight, the eternal kind of, he lost in the eyes of history and in the eyes of nature, because even though Scotland did join England, it became a real union, brother and brother, not slave and master. So even though Scotland was forced to join England, it was because of the valiant heroism of Wallace, it was so that Scotland joined it on equal terms. And I find it really funny. It's going to come up a little bit later. If the union with England be in fact one of Scotland's chief blessings, we thank Wallace withal that it was not the chief curse. Scotland is not Ireland, no, because brave men rose there and said, behold, ye must not tread us down like slaves, and ye shall not and cannot. Fight on, thou brave true heart, and falter not, through dark fortune and through bright. The cause thou fightest for, so far as it's true, no farther, yet precisely so far, is very sure of victory. So, One of the amusing things I found is that Carlyle is saying Scotland is not Ireland. So I think I'm not familiar with English history, but this does imply that Ireland was conquered in a way that is not an equal relationship, but in a sort of slave-master relationship. And Carlyle is saying Scotland is not like Ireland. We joined. I assume, actually, without knowing it for sure, that Carlyle might be Scottish. Let's ask: is Carlyle Scottish? Yes. Unsurprisingly, Thomas Carlyle was Scottish. Okay, so Thomas Carlyle says, William Wallace, to the extent the cause thou fightest for, so far as it's true. So, to the extent that the cause that William Wallace fought for was just, to that extent, and to that extent any cause is just, is very sure of victory. So Wallace might have lost the fight, he might have been executed, but Scotland did join England as a brother to brother, and therefore, ultimately, when the issue is awaited and the dust has settled and the fluctuating complex media and vortices they've all kind of settled, it's essentially a victory. The cause to force Scotland was ultimately a victory because Scotland was not a slave but a brother to England, even though it formed a union. The falsehood alone of it will be conquered. It will be abolished as it ought to be, but the truth of it is part of nature's own laws, cooperates with the world's eternal tendencies, and cannot be conquered. So to the extent that you have a cause of fight, the falsehood will be lost to time, it will be conquered, but the truth will prevail. The truth of the cause, the part of it that is just, will prevail. The dust of controversy, what is it but the falsehood flying off from all manner of conflicting true forces and making such a loud dust whirlwind that so the truths alone may remain and embrace brother-like in some true resulting force? It is ever so. So he's saying the dust up is basically like the conflicts, the conflicting forces being scattered off, and the only thing remaining is the truth. Savage fighting heptarchies. Their fighting heptarchy, by the way, is a country or region consisting of 7 smaller autonomous regions. So I believe that is what England was at the time. Savage fighting heptarchies, in fact, it's explained later, so he's talking about England. Savage fighting heptarchies, their fighting is an ascertainment who has the right to rule over whom, that out of such waste-bickering Saxondom a peacefully cooperating England may arise. Seek through this universe, if with other than owl's eyes, thou wilt find nothing nourished there, nothing kept in life, but what has the right to nourishment and life. The rest, look at it with other than owl's eyes, is not living, is all dying, all as good as dead. Justice was ordained from the foundations of the world and will last with the world and longer. So he's saying, if you don't look at the universe through owl's eyes, so if you look at it through any other eyes other than an owl's, you'll find that there's nothing kept alive but what has the right to nourishment and life. So the only things that persist on are the things that deserve persisting on because they are fundamentally just and aligned. And everything that is not in alignment is basically dying or as good as dead. I found this strange because owl's eyes, in our modern world, we think of owls as wise. So owl's eyes would seem like something good, but here it's talking as if something bad. So when I looked this up, yeah. Carlyle's phrase "owl's eyes" is a metaphor for a dim, unspiritual, or false way of seeing, the kind of vision that perceives only surface appearances or material facts, not the deeper moral truth of things. So this is just a difference in the metaphors from that time and ours. Yeah. So the only thing that prevails, that is long-lasting, is things that are just, from which I infer that the inner sphere of fact in this present England as elsewhere differs infinitely from the outer sphere and spheres of semblance, that the temporary here as elsewhere is too apt to carry it over the eternal, that he who dwells on the temporary semblances and does not penetrate into the eternal substance will not answer the Sphinx riddle of today or of any day. For the substance alone is substantial, that is the law of fact. If you discover not that, fact who already knows it will let you also know it by and by. So he's saying that there's a big difference between the semblance and the truth, the thing itself. And so if you're always in the temporary semblances, in the dust-ups, if you're always in the fluctuations, and you don't touch or connect with the eternal, you will not be able to meet the demanded challenges, the demanded riddles of the day. And that doesn't mean that the justice and nature is changing, that is fact. It only means that you didn't discover it, and in time, your mistaken path will be corrected. What is justice? That, on the whole, is the question of the Sphinx to us. The law of fact is that justice must and will be done. The sooner the better, for the time grows stringent, frightfully pressing. What is justice? Ask many to whom cruel fact alone will be able to prove responsive. It says the primary question, the question of the Sphinx to us is what is justice and how can we do this justice? And he says, many to whom cruel fact alone will be able to prove responsive. So many are on the wrong path, many are not able to answer this question correctly, and only this frightful, abrupt, destructive correction will be able to set them to the right path. It is like jesting Pilate asking what is truth. Jesting Pilate had not the smallest chance to ascertain what was truth. He could not have known it had a God shown it to him. Thick, serene opacity, thicker than amaurosis, veiled those smiling eyes of his to truth. The inner retina of them was gone, paralytic, dead. He looked at truth and discerned her not, there where she stood. What is justice? The clothed, embodied justice that sits in Westminster Hall with the penalties, parchments, tipstaves is very visible. But the unembodied justice, whereof that other is either an emblem or else is a fearful indescribability, is not so visible. For the unembodied justice is of heaven, a spirit and divinity of heaven, invisible to all but the noble and pure of soul. Let's take a closer look here. So, what is justice is the real question of the Sphinx, and as mentioned, many people are not able to answer that question correctly. It's like Pilate, which is referring to Pontius Pilate, Jesus Christ's executioner. It's like Pilate's asking what is truth, and he has no ability to perceive the truth at all. He could not have known it if God had shown it to him. He's saying thick, serene opacity. The eyes are completely blind to justice and truth. Thicker than amaurosis. Amaurosis means partial or total blindness without visible change in the eye, typically due to the disease of the optic nerve, spinal cord, or brain. So it is a very fundamental, very thick kind of inability to perceive the truth that someone like Pilate and many others like him in the present are experiencing from the perspective of Carlyle. He says he looked at truth and discerned her not. The truth, what must be done, the just act could stare at you right in the face and you can still not perceive it if you're like Pilate. He says the clothed embodied justice, so the justice that is earthly, that sits in Westminster Hall, it has lots of accoutrements, it has the parchments, the tipstaves are the guys helping an officer whose duties include assisting the judge, acting as a crier, etc. So basically there's like a lot of people with a lot of roles and a lot of accoutrements of justice, and they're visible. But the unembodied justice, the one that is not on earth, not physical, he's saying is invisible to all but the noble and pure of soul. The impure, ignoble gaze with eyes, the impure, ignoble gaze with the eyes, and she is not there. So the impure, ignoble people, they only believe what they can see with their eyes, and the only thing they see with their eyes is obviously the people in Westminster Hall with their parchments. So they look and she is not there. The justice, the unembodied justice, the eternal, is not there because they can't perceive it with their eyes. They will prove it to you by logic, by endless Hansard debatings, by bursts of parliamentary eloquence. It is not consolatory to behold, for properly as many men as there are in a nation who can withal see heaven's invisible justice, here withal means nevertheless. So for properly as many men as there are in a nation who can nevertheless see heaven's invisible justice and know it to be on earth, also omnipotent, so many men are there who stand between a nation and perdition, so many and no more. Heavy laden England, how many hast thou in this hour? The supreme power sends new and ever new, all born with at least hearts of flesh and not of stone, and heavy misery itself, once heavy enough, will prove didactic. So Carlyle, I think, is this the last one? Yeah. He concludes by saying, the noble of the soul, they can perceive this unembodied justice, but the impure, the ignoble, they can't perceive it, and they will prove that the earthly one, the embodied justice, is true with and they will do so by their logic, by their lawyerly logic, by Hansard debatings. By the way, Hansard debating refers to the official record of debates in the British Parliament, known as Hansard. Since the early 19th century, Hansard has published verbatim transcripts of speeches and discussions in both houses of Parliament. So that's what, basically through official proceedings, through eloquence, they will try to persuade you, the impure and the ignoble will try to persuade you that the earthly, temporary thing is the real thing. But that does not console us, because it's only as many men in a nation who can see heaven's invisible justice. As many as those men are present, they stand between a nation and perdition. I think that means destruction. A stain of eternal punishment and damnation, into which a sinful and unpenitent person passes. So in the context of a nation, it means like your nation being cursed eternally is only prevented by the people who can properly see heaven's invisible justice and act accordingly. So many and no more. So if you run out of those people, your nation will come to an end. Heavy laden England, how many hast thou in this hour? So how many of those noble souls are there in England today among the 27 million? And he's a little bit consoled. He's saying new and ever new people are born, at least with hearts of flesh and not of stone, so they at least have the capacity to perceive heavenly justice. But he's saying ultimately heavy misery, once heavy enough, so once there are not many of those people left, and the hearts are of stone, only heavy misery will teach you will be the final teacher. Thank you for listening to Thomas Carlyle's Past and Present Sphinx.